Summorum Pontificum is an apostolic letter of Pope Benedict XVI, issued motu proprio, by which he specified the circumstances in which priests of the Latin Church may celebrate Mass according to what he called the Missal promulgated by Blessed John XXIII in 1962, and administer most of the sacraments in the form used before the liturgical reforms that followed the Second Vatican Council. The document, dated the 7th of July 2007 and in force since the 14th of September 2007, was released along with a letter in which Pope Benedict explained his reasons for issuing it. The document replaced the motu proprio Ecclesia Dei of 1988, which allowed individual bishops to establish places where Mass could be said using the 1962 Missal. It granted greater freedom to use the Tridentine liturgy in its 1962 form, stating that all priests may freely celebrate Mass with the 1962 Missal privately, without having to ask for permission from anyone. It also provided that, in parishes where a group of the faithful attached to the previous liturgical tradition stably exists, the parish priest should willingly accede to the requests to celebrate Holy Mass according to the rite of the 1962 Roman Missal, and should ensure that the good of these members of the faithful is harmonized with the ordinary pastoral care of the parish, under the governance of the bishop. In his accompanying letter, Pope Benedict explained that his action was aimed at broadly and generously providing for the rituals which nourished the faithful for centuries, and at coming to an interior reconciliation in the heart of the Church with traditionalist Catholics in disagreement with the Holy See, such as the members of the Society of St. Pius X. He stated that, while it had first been thought that interest in the Tridentine Mass would disappear with the elder generation that had grown up with it, some young persons too have felt its attraction and found in it a form of encounter with the mystery of the Eucharist particularly suited to them. Quote, in view of fears expressed while the document was in preparation, he took pains to emphasize that his decision in no way detracts from the authority of the Second Vatican Council, and that, not only for juridical reasons, but also because the requisite degree of liturgical formation and some knowledge of the Latin language are not found very often, the Mass of Paul VI remains the normal or ordinary form of the Roman Rite Eucharistic liturgy. Contents of the motu proprio and the accompanying letter. Name. As is customary for papal documents, the motu proprio is referred to by its incipit, the opening words of the original text. Summorum Pontificum, Supreme Pontiff, is a title of the popes, and the opening sentence states that it has always been a concern of the Supreme Pontiffs that the Church should offer fitting worship to God. Summary of Summorum Pontificum. Pope Benedict XVI released the document after much reflection, numerous consultations, and prayer. In Article 1 of the document, he spoke of the typical edition of the Roman Missal, which was promulgated by Blessed John XXIII in 1962, as never abrogated. In the letter he specified this as never juridically abrogated. In Article 2 he stated that, in Masses celebrated without a congregation, any Catholic priest of the Latin Rite, whether secular or regular, may use either the Roman Missal published in 1962 by Blessed Pope John XXIII or the Roman Missal promulgated in 1970 by Pope Paul VI, and may do so on any day, with the exception of the Easter Triduum. For such a celebration with either Missal, the priest needs no permission from the Apostolic See or from his own ordinary, quote, In Article 4, he said that these masses celebrated without a congregation may be attended also by members of the lay faithful who spontaneously request to do so. With respect for the requirements of law regarding public masses, the Pope asked parish priests and rectors of churches to permit, at the request of a group of the faithful attached to the previous liturgical tradition stably existing in the parish, celebration of a Tridentine Mass on weekdays, but also one such Mass on Sundays and feasts, by a priest who is qualified and who is not excluded by law, and to grant permission also if requested, in special circumstances such as marriages, funerals or occasional celebrations, e.g. pilgrimages. Apart from celebration of Mass, Pope Benedict authorized parish priests to grant, after careful consideration, and, if advantageous for the good of souls, permission to use the older ritual in the administration of baptism, marriage, penance, and anointing of the sick. He also allowed bishops, on the same condition, to use the earlier pontifical in administering confirmation, and permitted clergy to use the 1962 edition of the Roman Breviary. Bishops may establish personal parishes, or appoint chaplains for administering the sacraments according to the old form. The Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, whose role the document confirmed, was given authority to ensure observance of the rules laid down in the document. Stable groups of the kind mentioned in Article 5 whose parish priest does not grant them the request should inform the diocesan bishop, who is asked to satisfy the desire. If he does not wish to do so, they should inform the Pontifical Commission, to which also a bishop who does not have the means to respond to the wish can have recourse for advice and assistance. The Pope clarified that, as a result of his motu proprio, the last version of the Missal Romanum prior to the Council, which was published with the authority of Pope John XXIII in 1962 and used during the Council, will now be able to be used as a forma extraordinaria of the liturgical celebration, but that the Missal published by Paul VI and then republished in two subsequent editions by John Paul II, obviously is and continues to be the normal form, the forma ordinaria of the Eucharistic liturgy, and that it is clearly seen that the new Missal will certainly remain the ordinary form of the Roman Rite, not only on account of the juridical norms, but also because of the actual situation of the communities of the faithful. The motu proprio allows what some traditionalists would call the novelty of proclaiming the scripture readings, also in the vernacular language in Masses with a congregation, and in the accompanying letter the Pope said that new saints and some of the new prefaces can and should be inserted in the old Missal, a matter that he committed for study to the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei. Summary of the accompanying letter. In his cover letter to the bishops, Pope Benedict declared unfounded two fears that had been expressed with regard to the change that he was making, that the change would detract from the authority of the Second Vatican Council, and that it would lead to disarray or even divisions within parish communities. He recognized that there have been exaggerations and at times social aspects unduly linked to the attitude of the faithful attached to the ancient Latin liturgical tradition, to avoid the situation whereby the desire to recover the old form of liturgy occurred, above all because in many places celebrations were not faithful to the prescriptions of the new Missal, but the latter actually was understood as authorizing or even requiring creativity, which frequently led to deformations of the liturgy which were hard to bear, caused deep pain to individuals totally rooted in the faith of the Church. He recommended faithful observance of the Missal of Paul VI. The most sure guarantee that the Missal of Paul VI can unite parish communities and be loved by them consists in its being celebrated with great reverence in harmony with the liturgical directives. This will bring out the spiritual richness and the theological depth of this missal. Interior reconciliation. Benedict cited interior reconciliation in the heart of the Church as a positive reason for the motu proprio. Traditionalist groups, such as the Society of St. Pius X, whose founder Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre was excommunicated in 1988 following the icon consecrations, set permission to use the Tridentine Mass as a preliminary condition for engaging in any doctrinal dialogue with the Holy See. Benedict, who himself led discussions with the SSPX during his tenure as prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, gave as a reason for making the effort represented by his motu proprio the regretted fact that, over the centuries, at critical moments when divisions were coming about, not enough was done by the Church's leaders to maintain or regain reconciliation and unity, and omissions on the part of the Church have had their share of blame for the fact that these divisions were able to harden. But he pointed out in the same cover letter that, needless to say, in order to experience full communion, the priests of the communities adhering to the former usage cannot, as a matter of principle, exclude celebrating according to the new books. The total exclusion of the new rite would not, in fact, be consistent with the recognition of its value and holiness. Thus, while opening the door to the Tridentine Mass, the Pope expects the SSPX to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Mass of Paul VI. SSPX Superior General Bishop Felli wrote, "The letter which accompanies the motu proprio does not hide, however, the difficulties that still remain." Felli then stated that the Society is eager, after the decree of excommunication which still affects its bishops has been withdrawn, to consider more serenely the disputed doctrinal issues. After saying in his letter to bishops, with which he accompanied the motu proprio, that in the movement led by Archbishop Lefebvre, fidelity to the old missal became an external mark of identity, Pope Benedict added, "The reasons for the break which arose over this, however, were at a deeper level." Appeal of the ancient form. Apart from the question of reconciliation with traditionalist groups, the Pope also mentioned that, immediately after the promulgation of the new form of the Mass, it was presumed that requests for the use of the 1962 Missal would be limited to the older generation which had grown up with it, but recognizes that, in the meantime, it has clearly been demonstrated that young persons too have discovered this liturgical form, felt its attraction and found in it a form of encounter with the mystery of the Most Holy Eucharist, particularly suited to them. Due to this continuing appeal of the ancient form of the Mass across generational groups, it was felt that cases should no longer be decided on a case-by-case basis, and that, instead, the need had arisen for clearer juridical regulation which had not been foreseen in the past. The Pope stressed, "There is no contradiction between the two editions of the Roman Missal. In the history of the liturgy there is growth and progress, but no rupture. What earlier generations held as sacred remains sacred and great for us too, and it cannot be all of a sudden entirely forbidden or even considered harmful. It behooves all of us to preserve the riches which have developed in the Church's faith and prayer, and to give them the proper place." Quote. He continued by demanding recognition also of the value and holiness of celebration according to the new books. Conditions for use of the 1962 Missal. The conditions for the use of the 1962 Missal previously in force are replaced by the following. In Masses celebrated without a congregation, any Catholic priest of the Latin Rite, whether secular or religious, may use either the Roman Missal published in 1962 by Blessed John XXIII, or the Roman Missal promulgated in 1970 by Pope Paul VI, and may do so on any day, with the exception of the Easter Triduum. For such a celebration with either Missal, the priests need no permission from the Apostolic Apostolic See from his own ordinary. The celebrations of Mass mentioned above may be attended also by members of the lay faithful who spontaneously request to do so, with respect for the requirements of law. In parishes where a group of the faithful attached to the previous liturgical tradition stably exists, the parish priest should willingly accede to the requests to celebrate Holy Mass according to the rite of the 1962 Roman Missal. He should ensure that the good of these members of the faithful is harmonized with the ordinary pastoral care of the parish, under the governance of the bishop in accordance with Canon 390. Avoiding discord and favoring the unity of the whole Church. In churches other than parish or conventual churches, it is for the rector of the Church to grant the above permission. Celebration according to the Missal of Blessed John XXIII can take place on weekdays, on Sundays and feast days. However, such a celebration may also take place. The English translation unfortunately omits the limitation on Sundays and feast days to a single such Mass. This limitation is expressed in the Latin text, which is what has juridical value. For those faithful or priests who request it, the pastor should allow celebrations in this extraordinary form also in special circumstances such as marriages, funerals or occasional celebrations, e.g. pilgrimages. Priests using the Missal of Blessed John XXIII must be qualified and not prevented by law. Excommunication or suspension or divinus would be examples. Legal prohibitions against celebrating Mass. If communities of institutes of consecrated life and societies of apostolic life, whether of pontifical or diocesan rite, wish to celebrate the conventual or community Mass in their own oratories according to the 1962 edition of the Roman Missal, they are permitted to do so. If an individual community or an entire institute or society wishes to have such celebrations frequently, habitually or permanently, the matter is to be decided by the major superiors according to the norm of law and the particular laws and statutes. In an interview on Vatican Radio, the then Cardinal President of the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei Dario Castrion Hoyos commented that priests can decide, without permission from the Holy See of the bishop, to celebrate the Mass in the ancient rite. And this holds true for all priests. It is the parish priests who must open the doors to those priests that, having the faculty, go to celebrate. It is not therefore necessarily to ask any other permission. Article 2 of the motu proprio applies, without distinction, to priests of the Latin Rite, all of whom are therefore authorized to use, in Masses celebrated without the people, either the older or the newer form of the Roman Rite, even if they are also authorized to use another Latin liturgical rite, such as the Ambrosian Rite. It does not apply to priests of the Eastern Catholic Churches. It concerns only the Roman Rite and does not deal with use of older forms of other Latin liturgical rites, which is a matter for the authorities charged with regulating those rites. With Letter 13/2007 of the 20th of January 2010, the Pontifical Council Ecclesia Dei responded positively to a question whether a parish priest or another priest may on his own initiative publicly celebrate the extraordinary form, along with the customary regular use of the new form, so that the faithful, both young and old, can familiarize themselves with the old rites and benefit from the perceptible beauty and transcendence. Although the Council accompanied this response with the observation that a stable group of the faithful attached to the older form has a right to assist at Mass in the extraordinary form, a website that published the response interpreted it as not requiring the existence of such a stable group. History. The Roman rite of Mass has undergone, especially in the early centuries, various developments. In response to Sacrosanctum Concilium, the 1963 document of the Second Vatican Council, it was systematically revised, leading to the publication, in 1970, of Pope Paul VI's revision of the Roman Missal, which some traditionalist Catholics claimed constituted a rupture with what went before. In the letter that accompanied Summorum Pontificum, Pope Benedict XVI stated, "There is no contradiction between the two editions of the Roman Missal. In the history of the liturgy there is growth and progress, but no rupture." But some traditionalists opposed the use of the new form of the liturgy and demanded what they called a universal indult, whereby all priests would be allowed to use the former rite even publicly without seeking any specific authorization. For more than a year before the publication of Summorum Pontificum, Vatican officials, such as Cardinal Castrion Hoyos, president of the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, indicated that Pope Benedict XVI had decided to issue a document on the matter. As the date on which it was in fact issued approached, these declarations became more precise. The views of bishops in various countries and also of traditionalist groups were sought on the various drafts. On the part of the bishops, two fears were expressed, which Pope Benedict mentioned in the letter to bishops with which he accompanied his motu proprio, declaring them unfounded. One was fear that the document would detract from the authority of the Second Vatican Council, by calling into question one of the Council's essential decisions, namely the liturgical reform. The other was fear that the possibility of a wider use of the 1962 Missal would lead to disarray or even divisions within parish communities. On the latter fear, the Pope commented that the use of the old Missal presupposes a certain degree of liturgical formation and some knowledge of the Latin language. Neither of these is found very often, and that accordingly, it is clearly seen that the new Missal will certainly remain the ordinary form of the Roman Rite. Cardinal Castrion Hoyos, president of the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, the body charged with overseeing the implementation of the motu proprio Summorum Pontificum, commented on the worry that some have expressed, even after publication of the motu proprio, that a small minority of believers may impose the Mass of St. Pius V on the parish. He stated, "Those who say that obviously haven't read the motu proprio. It's clear that no parish priest will be obliged to celebrate the Mass of St. Pius V, only that if a group of the faithful, having a priest disposed to say it, asks to celebrate this Mass, the parish priest or the rector of the church can't oppose it.